Last year, I got the opportunity to travel outside of Europe for the first time in my life. And that was a really big deal for me. I've never owned a dedicated camera unless you count this Sony Cybershot, which you don't. It tries to guess colors and fails when you point it at whatever scene. So I decided to get a proper camera, and it may surprise you, if you haven't been following the camera scene these last few years, that this is the most hyped up camera since its release back in 2020. So that's what I got. If you happen to be someone who has followed the camera scene for these last few years, you probably don't even need me to say the name of this camera for you to figure out what it is. It's, of course, the Fujifilm X100V, a darling of the established camera community. But I'm not established, I am new here, as in new to photography as a whole. Outside of quick smartphone snaps, that is. So before getting on a plane to Tokyo, I had to practice. And it got to the point where I felt kind of bad when I wasn't out practicing with this camera, because it's quite beautiful. Its retro nature is reasonably non-assuming, and the build quality is excellent. It's somehow both boxy and sleek with its flowing lines. It's screaming at me to go out and use it to take photos. Normal people will assume that it's just some little touristy cameras, but it can be an absolute powerhouse in the right hands. And the buttons and dials. They are delightful. Tokyo is a very interesting city, visually speaking. I think a lot of people picture Tokyo as this bright and colorful place, which is both true and false. Most buildings actually appear gray, which is most readily apparent when viewing the city from above. This muted look is complemented by a whole fleet of white boxy cars. The vibrancy of the city comes from the numerous signs that are dotting the buildings. The city infrastructure itself is grey and muted, but it has an extremely effective colorful overlay. At this point, I didn't really think of honing in on specific architectural features with my X100V. Instead, I focused on capturing whole buildings, which the 23mm lens is well suited for. It's also incredibly small, so pointing it up at buildings all day long doesn't get tiring in the hand. It's quite easy to carry around and maneuver as you need. The city becomes different at night. The touristy areas are absolutely packed with people and bright lights. Bars in tight alleyways are overcrowding with patrons and laughter. But after the last train for the night, the city quietens down and becomes more intimate. Akihabara becomes almost completely empty. And all the speakers on numerous buildings that are usually spouting commercials are silent. A few car enthusiasts may be meeting up in Akihabara, but other than that, it's dead compared to daytime. Walking down the impeccably clean and empty alleyways is a very surreal experience. The bars have largely emptied out, but there is that core group that have been eating and drinking together all night long and have now grown a lot more familiar with each other. The X100V is a very silent camera, and that's very useful for situations like these. You're not going to disturb anyone in the night hours by taking pictures with it. The quiet shutter is also a huge benefit if you're trying to take pictures of people without them noticing you. And of course, in the bustling capital of Japan, there are plenty of opportunities to do so. One day I stumbled upon a parade at Tsukiji Fish Market. I actually didn't intend to go to Tsukiji Fish Market, and I definitely didn't intend to go to a parade, but it just so happened. The atmosphere was simply amazing. It was joyful, it felt celebratory, and it gave me plenty of opportunities to see what this thing could do when it came to shooting people. Tokyo feels to me, as someone who's from Denmark, as a never-ending city. Even traveling to Yokohama, I didn't really feel like I left one city and entered another. Looking over the skyline from the Tokyo Skytree, I couldn't see the end. I could only see the sea when I was looking out towards the harbor. That also means that nature is of the more structured variety, so mostly parks. But if you want something a little more unstructured, Kamakura's a great start. Again, I got an incredibly surreal feeling walking around these streets now in Kamakura. I felt encased, and I didn't feel like I was really in a city. The streets are surrounded by hills that themselves are covered in trees and leaves and bushes. So you can't quite easily connect the street you're on to the surrounding area. It feels like its own focused, quiet area. And there's even a cute local train that's incredibly cozy, if it weren't for the numerous tourists absolutely packing it. A moment that quite clearly sticks in my mind is when I was returning to the train station that would take me to Tokyo. I entered a convenience store to get a little something to eat, and as I exited, this sound was playing through the loudspeakers, this melody. After visiting Kamakura, I wanted to visit another place outside of Tokyo, and I settled on Fuji. Not the mountain, but the city of Fuji. And it's quite funny, the visit to Fuji is probably what sticks out the most in my mind when I think back to my trip to Japan. It was raining quite a bit, but after a while it cleared up and I got to photograph one of the most interesting beaches I've ever seen in my life. It was quiet and oddly peaceful as I was walking along this beach, despite the several meters high waves that were bashing against the concrete barrier. It was just me at the edge of Japan on a beach with black sand, waves rhythmically barraging the D-Day reminiscent barrier, and with Mount Fuji towering behind me. Interests have a habit of entering and exiting my life where only a few truly stick around for a long time. And having this camera with me for my first trip outside of Europe is quite special. At the risk of sounding melodramatic, I do believe it's fair to say that walking around with a proper dedicated camera like this, a camera that feels good to use, a camera that I want to use and that I feel like I need to sort of respect when taking photos, does lead to me approaching my environment in a totally different way, a more meaningful way, a way that makes me remember and relate to my surroundings that much better. I now aim for meaning and feeling more than I do cold documentary with my smartphone. Safe to say that this new hobby of mine will be sticking around for the long run.